I wanted to have as much space as possible in this room, so what did I do? Cut the door in half, and it turned out pretty well. So let me show you how I did this from the beginning. And it all starts with stripping layers of old paint off this door. And to do that, I use a heat gun. So let's get into it. In with the heat gun. The process is pretty straightforward. Heat it up, and then let the scraper glide through, lifting up all the paint. Every so often you get a build-up of muck like this on the scraper. I use an old chisel just to clean this off, but anything would work. Now this peels like this because it's oil-based paint. Water-based is a bit more flaky. After about 20 to 30 minutes, the first side of the door was complete. And now we do that all again. I won't make you watch all that again, so let's whiz through. Next up, the sanding. I'll just use this 80 grit and then spend the next 30 minutes sanding the whole door, front, back and sides. Now let's cut this door. I measured and marked the centre point and then did the same on the opposite end. Then I lined up the track saw. I lifted it like this just to make sure visually it looks central. Then quite simply, cut through it. I was worried these could be weak points, but they seem pretty solid. To hang this door, I'm using this kit, but at the moment I only need one thing out of it, and that is the hinges. So let's measure where they need to go. I marked up 20 centimeters from the top, and then 20 centimeters from the bottom, and then just the center point of the door. Now all marked up, I traced around where the hinges needed to be. Now you could cut these out with a chisel, but I used a router. Quick little fitment check, and then with everything cut out, it was time to screw it all in. Moment of truth, do all the door panels line up? Yes, they do. However, the fitment within the door frame was a bit tight, which I was expecting. Luckily, with the doors folded, there's a 5mm overhang. So I marked this up and then back to the track saw to trim this off. I knew some height needed to come off this door as there was extra parts. So I measured the height of the track and then the pin at the bottom. I added these measurements together and marked them on the bottom of the door. To cut this, I took the door back apart in case there was any random movement. Now to sort that track out, I marked the first bit to cut off and then cut through it using a hacksaw. I marked the rough position with a bit of tape on the other end, measured the length it needed to be and marked this, then double checked it lined up. Now back in with the hacksaw. Using the offcut from the bottom of the door, I made this to check the fitment. And I'm glad I did because it made me realise this trim needed to come off. So using a screwdriver and hammer, I removed it. Quick little sand, I'll come back and paint that later. Now I could work out the proper position of the track. I mark this and then measure the position from the edge of the door frame. Then I can measure and mark the same position on the opposite side. Now the track can simply just be screwed into position. I measured how far in the top pin sat, so that I could measure and mark where the bottom pin needed to be. Then I could line the base plate up and marked where the drill holes needed to go, and then drilled in some pilot holes. Remove that tape and gently screwed in the base plate. I used that offcut just to check the positioning and then make some fine adjustments. Now I could add the hardware to the actual door. I measured and marked this up, matching it to the offcut piece I made. Then just drilled a 10mm hole and installed the hardware. Repeated the same process for the other pieces. Now to test fit. I installed half the door first to make sure it opened and closed with no issues. Then I can install the other half of the door just by lining up the hinges and inserting the pins. And it opens and closes so smoothly. Now them joins where I'd cut the door in half were playing on my mind. I felt it could become weaker over time, so I drove in some long screws at an angle to add some strength. Then I used this wood filler, mixed it up and then filled all the holes and imperfections. Quick sand once it was all dry. Then I was on the last part of this project, the painting. 1 coat of primer and 2 coats of top coat. Then I can fit the finished door. Bottom pin in, then slide in the top pin. And I guess that's how it's done.